Hi, my name is Jayden and today I'll be going over influence. Influence is possible to not be as detrimental or impactful as people make it out to be. It does not change or define who we are, nor does it dilute our own self into becoming something toxic. Yet, this toxicity that many people speak of or point out due to influences, maybe because these influences are corrupt and they tend to bring out the worst that was already in us. Starting off, I'd like to say that influence is seen all over the world. It can be seen from television, social media, from our own parents, our neighborhood, video games, even the justice system, as well as much more. On the topic of what our starting influence tends to be, it derives mainly from our parents. Growing up, our parents are who we learn from the majority of our life. We learn how to walk, talk, as well as what to believe in, since from a young age we mirror what they do and what they say into our brain until it develops enough for us to think on our own. Yet sometimes this thought process can be a little too late, and we've already took what they believe for ourselves. This influence can be seen anywhere from when a parent pretends to hit a baby's head and talk softly, apologizing, which thus makes the baby cry, and can be seen from YouTube to anywhere in social media, to when, according to data mentioned by Eleanor Maccoby in her review titled Parenting and Its Effect on Children, Reading and Misreading Behavior Genetics, it states that in Bourne's early findings, the children of parents who are both responsive and firm tend to be more competent and cooperative than children of parents who are either authoritarian or permissive. This goes over how moods and treatment of parents conveys to their children can dictate how they act as well as their mood. While this instance may be in the early stages of life, and that might be even more impactful to the child, beliefs made by their parents, like for instance what tastes good and what does not completely influence a child, is a prime example of how it's vice versa and flip. So the parent does not always dictate a child to act a certain way, but teaching them can dictate, and how they treat them will dictate how they react. The image above is an example of evidence through how, while it may influence the kid in the bottom left, through it being the kid being unable to follow rules and being difficult and immature in school, they will later learn how to act and develop a conscience for themselves. Another instance where influence can be present yet it does not change what one believes in is through the justice system. The justice system has an influence that can be seen throughout history, as well as in books, for example, Oresteia, and through how Orestes influenced Athena to consider his actions of an eye for an eye as just for avenging his father. This she did consider just, yet also stuck to her principles and made it so actions like this would no longer be tolerated as just within her court. This goes to show how many have been influenced to allow Orestes to go free. How she may have been influenced to allow Orestes to go free from killing his mother, but she did not let this killing of a family member ruin the principles that she believed in. A different example of this can be seen through how people did not believe in what the justice system stood for, and instead of being influenced by its negative outlook, they changed it. This is seen with the bus boycott and segregation issues in the United States, and how people stood against this problem. relating to Oresteia one more time. The image above shows how Orestes killed his mother, Clytemnestra, which was a huge offense in Greek history and is punishable by the gods. Yet Athena looked past this, since Clytemnestra killed her husband. Now moving on to influence and how it could be corrupt within society and bring out the worst in one person. I like to go over power. Power is negative influence to those that let it bind them by how those with power have strength and status to believe in the saying that doing good to your friends and harm to your enemies is what power provides. This is said within the Republic, written by Plato, and shows how influential powers can be on the wrong person. They can let it dictate their actions and abuse the lesser. An example of this is with a dictator, specifically a past dictator of Yugoslavia, Joseph Broz Tito, also known as Tito. While many considered him a great leader, he did very bad things and abused his power, which is a prime example of how power can influence corrupt actions through what he did with said power, even if it was for the good of the people. This image above is another form of evidence through the quote that power in the wrong hands can be detrimental, yet if in the right hands, something good can occur. And shows like how it's two-sided in a way. A standard influence mentioned throughout our society is also seen with video games, and it's very common now and very political in a way, through how many politicians argue it has relations to gun violence, school shootings, and violence within teens. This also has no evidence behind it and is not very factual, yet politicians are seen to be saying these things. In the statistic below, the LA point video games lead to violence when the majority of younger members of society disagree. This just goes to show how the politicians, who tend to be more of the older side, find video games to be sort of, cruel and too violent, yet the younger who actually participate in playing these video games do not. Another statistic gone over how violent crime practically among the young has decreased drastically since the 1990s. Also talks about how this was during the same period where video games steadily increased and came out. This is according to the Software Association. Moving on, I'd like to go over why the majority of issues listed above do not drastically influence teens and the young. A major influence is seen through one's neighborhood. Neighborhoods are major influences on young growing minds, since it consists of so many things. For instance, it partakes in having schools and education, religious buildings like churches, as well as people that can all hold importance and impact to one's life. This is seen through how, depending on the environment of the neighborhood, all these things are impacted. For instance, violent neighborhoods will affect parenting and can make learning harder, as well as a sense of danger and fear being strongly developed into the young growing minds, as well as even the old. This image shown provides evidence through how, since there's a high police activity within the neighborhood, a fear of the police is coming to develop in the young, since they associate police with violence. According to a study led by researchers at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, suggests that these findings, published online in November issue of Social Science and Medicine, indicate that neighborhood quality has significant and long-term effects on child and adolescent problem behaviors, which was cited in an article by Barbara Benham on November 9th of 2017. So this article is rather recent and shows how the issues within society and violent neighborhoods are still extremely prevalent today. even more so, most likely, than they used to be. Focusing on education in school within neighborhoods, they impact young minds significantly as well, since the majority of knowledge we learn comes from schools when not from our parents. We are taught history, math, science, and more to better prepare students for a grown-up life and the world, yet influence in school has on students can tend to be somewhat lacking when they teach us a curriculum that, for the most part, in relation to history at least, tends to be from the perspective of the white man. In personal experience, I did not have a different ethnic perspective class until my junior year of high school, and that still was a college class, and I did not really see any other ethnic perspectives besides a few that were also college classes. But even a lot of schools don't have such offers. So many classes and information gave is often one-sided or not true because we don't see the whole story, and that's an issue. Not only are we not able to see the full story of classes, but off the image shown, we see that teachings tend to not be complete, and that lessons that are supposed to teach us how to live on our own and about adult lifestyle are not taught as much or at all in schools. Instead, we are taught that, for instance, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, when in reality, it's not even the powerhouse of the cell. It's false knowledge. A quote by Mark Twain goes off this issue on false knowledge with how I've never let my school interfere with my education. True education is not what school teaches us about apprehension and knowledge, but it's skills for the real world so that we can survive. That is what being educated is, really. Moving on, with all the examples of how influence can either be drastic, from the exaggerated dictatorship with power to the more modern, simple topic of schools and students. One influence that has become extremely prevalent and in the spotlight is social media. Social media is full of influence that can put both negative and positive thoughts into one's mind. The image shows how social media and ads influence the people within the image to spend money. According to the image, 67% of people have made purchases after seeing an advertisement on social media. It's over half, and this is just one type of influence seen within social media. Others can be described by how celebrities or companies influence their viewers to believe in specific things. Like, for instance, the standard of beauty has changed, and how influencers in social media make it that girls look skinnier and curvier, or how guys have abs and muscles, which is a primary example of influence. Another is the issue of comments made by others influencing how one feels about themselves. In many cases, social media can be seen as the most poisonous kind of influence. It is a double-edged sword that can both hurt and make one happy. This next image shown is a primary example of how it's a double-edged sword, through how the influence can change one's moods. For instance, the one with 0 likes seems to be sad, and the one with more likes seems to be happy and kind of showboaty in a way. It provides people with this partial attention that those likes come with, and can alter one's mood. Now, influence does not just pertain to one specific age group. Within social media, it can be seen to affect anybody of any age, young and old. In this image shown, it shows that while it may influence young Americans more, there is still an influence on older groups and people, as well as those younger than 18, immensely. This influence social media has on older groups is seen to actually be better, according to data that shows internet use has been shown to reduce senior risk of depression by as much as 33% in recent years. 33% is an extremely large percent, and shows how beneficial and sort of vice versa, or like the other side of the coin, social media is to the elderly. Because while it can be extremely toxic and sort of harsh to the young and influence, it has a positive outlook for the elderly, which is a good thing, yet also a sad thing. The issue on whether or not these influences greatly affect us is not due to how, who we are, it's due to how impressionable one is. To be impressionable means to be easily influenced with a lack of critical thinking and one's own opinion. Impressionable people are easily swayed by what they experience in life. This is why people that are not as impressionable are not as easily influenced. This quote by Mander goes over how critical thinking is a skill. It allows us to use reason and logic behind our idea and words. This means without critical thinking, one does not have much of an understanding of oneself, and is why and is why they follow others. This next image also shows a lack of critical thinking on an exaggerated scale, since without experience in one's ability to think for oneself at a younger age, before you learn otherwise at least, Bourne would try over and over again to fit the square in the circle, but would have no luck. So it wouldn't be until they learn that it's not going to fit and try something else, because they're thinking for themselves. Now, the ultimate question after this is how does one develop critical thinking so they aren't as easily influenced and can interpret things for themselves? Critical thinking can be developed in many ways, from asking questions to thinking for yourself instead of what others say. This image is shown as evidence to this through how to develop critical thinking, since one must generate their own ideas, interpret what is being said, analyze why the person said this, as well as the other steps. It allows you to form this critical thinking pattern and is a good start into developing the skill. This quote by Albert Einstein also highlights the fact that the need to understand for oneself is what raises a person above the others. It is when they decide not to follow and be impacted by what people do, but to follow what they believe in and what they can comprehend from themselves. They follow their own path and thus allow for them to be a critical thinker in a positive way. This is what I believe to be the influences of anything really, and how it influences mainly the young, but also how power or social media can influence both the elderly or anybody of any age really. Thank you.